So I am here today to show you, not just tell you, but show you how we can use artificial intelligence and big data analytics for cancer prevention. Typically, what my company does, and I'm the CEO of Vector Center, as Bill mentioned, we look at risk, and we look at risk in the space of water, food, and energy, and the nexus between those. This includes public health issues and water security issues. We just had a team on stage in Davos at the World Economic Forum annual meeting, and in preparing to go and speak on water security, Pope Francis issued a message for the world, and he said, I challenge you to be using these wonderful advances in technology, our fourth industrial revolution, including robotics, AI, and the like. I challenge you to use this for the service of humanity. So let's do it for cancer prevention. We created a special study specifically for this workshop today, specifically for less cancer. And Bill, we are very committed at Vector Center to sharing our public health findings with less cancer to forward your fine work. So our study today, we are comparing perception and reality. Well, what do I mean by reality? This is the science data, the evidence-based science data. It could be EPA groundwater data. It can also be CDC, NIH, NCI, evidence-based medicine data. So we look at that reality data, and then we compare it to perception. What do people think is true? Often we find there is a gap between the truth and what people perceive to be the truth about things. These gaps can seem problematic, but really they present opportunities for course correction. So let's get straight into our study. The first risk factor we looked at is obesity. Well, we've heard earlier today, and I will second this, that obesity is a cancer risk factor. In fact, it's the second leading preventable risk factor, second only to smoking tobacco. It is related and linked to 13 different types of cancer and responsible for 20% of new cancers. It also impacts people's survivorship, if they're going to survive cancer if they have it. So we mapped the obesity data from the CDC, this is 2016 data, to look at which states were the heaviest. And we can see on the map there, and the map shows darker states have the highest obesity rates, the lighter states have the lowest obesity rates. West Virginia has the highest obesity rate, 38%. Other heavy states, really, if you look at the states in the South, ranging from Kentucky down to Texas, those are other states with high levels of obesity. Yesterday from Nancy Rye, we heard that the current predictions for obesity for 2030 are going to be 60% of our population. And in addition to that, we'll have a predicted 500,000 new cases of cancer that can be linked to obesity by 2030. So let's look at what people think. Do people associate obesity as a risk factor for cancer? Our perception map is in blue. The darker colored states are the ones that have the most conversations in media articles and in social media postings discussing cancer. So for the perception data, using our AI analytics, we analyzed the past 2 years of news media articles and social media posts. It's millions upon millions of data points, and we were able to analyze it in real time thanks to the technology of artificial intelligence has now given our society. When we look at the perception, it does not match up to the areas where we have the highest obesity rates. In West Virginia, the heaviest state, there are few conversations linking obesity to cancer. That's true for most of those states in the South, apart from Texas, where we do have the heaviest states. And the most conversations that are discussing obesity as a cancer risk are California and New York, which do have some of the smaller obesity rates in their states. So this is an example where perception is not aligned with reality. We need to get the message out to those who need it the most. So this is a challenge not only for the current leaders, but for the future leaders on the other side of the room to help us come up with creative ways to spread that public education campaign. Next, we're going to look at alcohol. So the reality science, the evidence-based data, shows us that alcohol is a risk factor for cancer. The World Health Organization classifies substances, kind of like what we just heard in the town hall about the EPA and TSCA classifying substances. And the World Health Organization, they have a group called Group 1, and those are the worst of the worst, the bad actors. They are the known carcinogens in humans. Well, you're probably not surprised to hear about asbestos being on that list, or plutonium, arsenic, formaldehyde. To put it in perspective, DDT did not make that list. It wasn't a known carcinogen in humans, so it didn't make that list. But you might be surprised to learn that alcoholic beverages are listed as Group 1. Two reasons for that. First of all, there's ethanol in the alcoholic beverages. That's a Group 1 culprit. Secondly, the human body breaks alcoholic beverages down into a substance called acetaldehyde, second Group 1 substance. Do people know this? Perception comes next. But before that, I will mention, and I'm going to further a point that Dr. Brennan made earlier about alcohol and breast cancer. In addition to the link with breast cancer, we know that other cancers are involved with alcohol as well and linked. Specifically, according to the American Society for Clinical Oncology, that one beverage for women or two beverages for men, measured at an 8-ounce beverage, will double your risk for mouth and neck cancer and more than double your risk for esophageal cancer. So that's more of that science. So we mapped the alcohol drinking rates across the states. This is a 20-year study from 2002 to 2012. Our data came from the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation. Utah has the lowest drinking rate at nearly 27% of the adult population. The highest state, 68%. And overall, you can see by the color on the map, the darker colored states, there are 22 states with higher percentages of adults who drink. So here's the perception data. Perception's now at the top. Again, dark colored states in the map have more conversations in social media and more news media article postings linking alcohol to cancer. So there are really only 4 states that have that perception, kind of a darker colored state in the map, showing that there is a perception that alcohol and cancer are linked, as opposed to 22 states having high drinking levels. Let's look at Colorado and Wisconsin specifically. They both show low volume of social media and media postings linking alcohol and cancer, and yet they have some of the highest drinking rates at 63% in Colorado and nearly 68% in Wisconsin. To further this, there was a study done by ASCO, that American Society for Clinical Oncology. It was conducted last October and published January 1st. In that study, only 30% of people linked alcohol and cancer together as a risk factor. So this is another example of perception not being aligned with reality, and really shows the need for a strong public education campaign to bring the two closer together. Finally, I want to look at cancer clusters. We heard quite a bit about the Seacoast cluster that our friends in New Hampshire have worked tirelessly to prove. And Tom Sherman gave a great report on that this morning. And, you know, from the town hall that Miles just did, it really became clear about how difficult it is to get a chemical substance regulated. Well, the same is true with proving a cancer cluster. It's really, really hard. First of all, you have to see cancer, and you have to note that there's a higher rate of cancer than is expected. Often more than one cancer is involved. You have to eliminate other possible causes and other sources for the cancer. And then people move. So if we're looking at an environmental contaminant, people might have lived in the area and then moved away. So how do we account for that? And then when it's groundwater data, which it often is, a contaminant in groundwater, you need to, at that point, then get the science involved for the hydrology reports, showing water migration patterns over time for exposure. So the science is very, very tough to get into place, and of course that has to be that evidence-based science for the policymakers to be able to act upon it. So cancer clusters are an example of perception data leading first. And that's because of citizens. That's because of we the people reporting something's not right. Seems like there's just too much cancer in my neighborhood. So here we have mapped together perception data and reality data all in one. Not surprising, perception data leads. There are many more perceived sites than are exactly declared cancer clusters. So the declared clusters range from 0 to 5 per state, and you can see that based upon the color in the map. Texas and Illinois are the highest. The perception data we did with a dot, all the way up to a big circle. And so that's how many cases were reported as suspected cancer cluster sites. Texas had 145. suspected sites, of which 15 were declared cancer clusters. Illinois, 152 reported, of which 11 were declared cancer clusters. So clearly the perception of cancer clusters is currently outweighing how many are declared. Perhaps this is due to difficulties in proving a cluster, but the important thing is people are talking about it. They're getting that perception out there and not just remaining quiet and not bringing to the attention of the lawmakers and the scientists perceived problems. Well, we found some insights in looking at the perception data for cancer clusters. This was again looking at the past 2 years of social media and news media articles talking about cancer clusters. And it was interesting. You can see that California and North Carolina had the most conversations about cancer clusters. That didn't line up with where the most clusters were declared or where most of the clusters were reported. So we got into this a little bit further. And in that we found in North Carolina, Huntersville, North Carolina, there was a reported suspected cancer cluster involving a rare eye cancer. In the town, they had over 24 cases of this rare eye cancer. Now, it's of the type that usually only 5 people in 1 million will get this kind of cancer, and they're usually men age 60 and older. These cases, over half of the people who were diagnosed with the eye cancer were women age 30 and below. So it was reported back in 2013 as a suspected cluster. Investigation opened up on it. And then the investigation closed. 2015, the government determined there is no cluster. However, perception data kept going, didn't stop, continued, kept saying, we think something's wrong here, we think something's wrong here. And sure enough, the investigation just reopened last April. There's a $100,000 grant for a geospatial study. And the lead investigator, Dr. Jim Brennan, he is going to do a research update tomorrow. So stay tuned, listen for that, what the research update is. And we don't know if that's going to end up being a cancer cluster or not. But really, the challenge is that there are so many different areas in the country, and typically this has been compartmentalized data. It's been very difficult to report it all in one area and also do so in actionable time, bringing it into real time. So, looking at the fourth industrial revolution and the opportunities we have now using AI for cancer prevention, it could be that all of a sudden we're able now to report cancers much faster. Typically, the SEER database that epidemiologists and others use for cancer studies reports data at a 2-year lag time. Well, maybe in the future this is going to come up and be real time. Similarly, when we're looking at public education campaigns, rather than do a survey 3 months after it's done to see how we did, now we can analyze the data in real time on the map to see, is the message being understood? Is it getting to the right people? And if not, course correct midstream. So there are a lot of exciting new possibilities we have with using this big data in artificial intelligence for cancer prevention. Thank you.